Hello, and what you're about to watch is some combined footage from two book launches for Living the Difference, my new novella that's been published by Chronos Publishing. So there's part of it is from an in-person launch in Totnes in Devon, and then a Zoom online launch. I hope you enjoy that. The books themselves are available at the website address shown at the bottom of the screen. See you later. But thank you for coming. Thank you for taking the time out to be here at such an increasingly busy time of the year as well. A few weeks ago, my publisher, Chronos Publishing, a wonderful lady there called Taryn Johnston, said, why don't we make this a series? So the book launched today, published on Thursday and launched today, called Living the Difference, is Eastwood Story Book 2. The previous book, called Looking to Move On, is now called Eastwood Story Book 1. And I've written some 6,000 words for Eastwood Story Book 3. So you'll notice a similarity in the titles, and that's deliberate. Looking to Move On, Living the Difference. They're stories of hope over adversity. Stories written with you as the reader in mind, and how best perhaps other readers you can relate your own experiences. Sometimes I think it's quite helpful to reflect on our own lives in relation to fiction. And of course poets and novelists have done that for centuries. So the stories are set in the fictional town of Eastwood Minster, hence the title of the series, Eastwood Stories. The first story, Looking to Move On, introduced Matt West, who as a result of a car accident now uses a wheelchair. And it was an event which saw the loss of his wife, Jo. And that story explores all he experienced in terms of bereavement and grief, his rehabilitation, his ongoing life with Tilly, their young daughter, and also the support he received from others. And among other characters, the story introduces us to Sophie Howlett, who is a community nurse who supported Matt through his treatment. And as time goes on, their friendship and their love grow. And a spoiler alert for those of you who haven't read that one, it ends on the weekend of their wedding. So, a very happy ending. The book was also a finalist in the Page Turner Book Awards. Now, Living the Difference, so the new book, starts on that same weekend. And while Matt, Sophie and Tilly are very much in the story, I've shifted the focus onto two other people who played cameo roles in the first one. One is the Reverend Liz James, who's the vicar of St Mark's Church, and she took their wedding. So there's lots of insights in there in what it's like being a vicar and what it's like living in a vicarage. And then there's someone who wasn't even mentioned in the last book, but was there by implication. On the evening of the accident, there is a bus waiting at the traffic lights nearby. So we meet Nick, the driver of the bus, who witnessed the accident and what he then went through subsequently. We also meet Liz James's best friend Alice, who delves deep into the past. And once again, we meet Ian and Greg and Mrs. Conway, and the lovely Michael Frampton, who owns the jeweller's shop. But you'll have to read the book to find out more. Now, Eastwood Minster is a close-knit community with a few drop stitches. And Steve Archibald is one of them, and his antics cause difficulties for Jess Wilson, among others. So let's join them. So he's 26. His parents separated when he was 6, and he'd not seen his dad since. He occasionally texted his mum, who'd left the market town a few years ago, and she'd lived with a string of unsuitable partners, sometimes more than one at a time. As a teenager, he collected asbos for a hobby, and he once got done for taking without consent. Drunk and disorderly was another speciality. But when the local police community support officer took an interest and helped him get a job as a glazier's mate, Steve's life began to turn around. Jess Wilson was 2 years younger, and until moving in with Steve, had lived with her parents in what locals called the upper quarter. Always smartly dressed, Jess's dark brown hair was tied in a chignon bun. A childcare assistant at the local preschool, her life had been far more stable and secure than her fiancé's. Her parents took to Steve quite quickly, which was a surprise to all of them. But their welcome and affirmation was an experience he'd never had from his own. Of not dissimilar build and height, although Steve's hair was a lot shorter, a number 3 fade, they'd been together for 2 years and lived in a rented furnished flat above the Co-op in the High Street. Jess had proposed to Steve a week ago over a box of fish and chips in the park. She'd seen the difference in him and was proud of all that he'd done to get himself to a better place. She wanted them to spend the rest of their lives together, and he said he did too. Steve still had the occasional night out with his mates, and over the years, cheap alcohol often provided more than he bargained for, as the tattooed vulture, which peered out from under his left armpit, bore witness. His mates were a rough crowd, and Jess worried they might take him back to his old ways. But they'd seen the difference too. Some even wished they could be the same. That Sunday afternoon, Jess and Steve weren't the first couple to stand outside J. Frampton Jewellers. Arm in arm, like 2 excited schoolchildren, they looked through the window of the closed shop. That one, Jess said finally with a smile. Let's come back Saturday then, her fiancé replied. No, the Saturday. Michael Frampton kept everything just as his father had before him. J. Frampton Jewellers had stood in the High Street for over 60 years, while other retailers came and went. It was an old-fashioned shop whose clientele received old-fashioned service. As Jess and Steve opened the door, a bell tinkled in an old-fashioned way. It had sounded the arrival of many customers over the years. Many coming to celebrate, many not knowing what they wanted, many just wanting a browse. Pleasant and customer-focused as always, Michael listened as Jess explained they couldn't afford much. She pointed towards the lone showcase fixed to the wall of the external passageway which ran alongside the shop. As the shopkeeper returned, requisite tray in hand, the bell tinkled once more. "When's the big day?" he asked. "Not till this time next year," Jess replied. "Is it going to be at St. Mark's?" "Yes," replied Jess. "In fact, we're going to see the vicar on Monday. The reception's at Eastwood Court. There'll only be a few of us, but we're looking forward to it." "We wanted to go to the hotel on the edge of town," Steve added, "but it's closing and turning into some sort of death and dying place." "Ah, yes, I know where you mean," Michael responded to his customer's rather awkward description. He fingered the buttons on his pinstripe waistcoat, partially hidden by a matching jacket. Below his half-rimmed glasses, a smile masked the sadness he felt. Michael Frampton found it hard to keep going after his wife's death 3 years previously. Nearing retirement, the shop was his life, but that too would die soon. Business wasn't what it was used to be, and he wanted to make the most of this next stage of life. He'd had some contact with his son and would like to see more of him, but they didn't have that much in common. Things had been rather strained since Janet's death. He smiled to himself at the memory of the day their son was born. He wanted to call the young Mr. Frampton Peter, after the pop singer. Janet sang, "I want you to show me the way," all afternoon, so they didn't. "The vicar's lovely. You'll like her," Michael continued, remembering the couple whose wedding she'd taken the previous weekend. "Would you like to try it on?" he asked Jess somewhat unnecessarily. Sliding onto her third finger, A nudge took it over the knuckle. Perfect, she said. Steve said he liked it too. Before long, a small red dot marked the price tag as Michael replaced the tray in the showcase. There it would stay, awaiting Steve's return with the credit card he'd left at the flat. Michael liked to keep a full display, and a red dot was a sign that people were buying. Jess had arranged to be with her parents the rest of the day, trying on dresses, visiting the florist, talking with the people at Eastwood Court. Steve was going with his mates to watch T20 cricket, England versus New Zealand. They were taking the train, so no danger of drink driving this time. He told Jess he'd pick up the ring before he went.
Something's going to go wrong.
Don't give it away. Taron Johnston at my publishers suggested that given Matt West uses a wheelchair, that the stories explore aspects of living with health problems, amongst other things. She suggested that the book was published to coincide with the United Nations International Day of Persons with Disabilities, which took place on Sunday. I was interviewed by BBC Radio Devon that morning, talking about the book and disability and health issues. So let's rejoin Matt, Sophie and Tilly, and we also welcome back another character from the first book. Morning, whispered Sophie, stretching her right arm across Matt's body. She could feel his chest's gentle rise and fall, accompanied by a rhythmic heartbeat. Hands were stroking hands. Early morning daylight crept its way around the edges of the curtains. They kissed. The appearance of a flying camel was somewhat unusual, even in the not-so-sleepy town of Eastwood Minster. The beast's legs and neck turned like uncoordinated rotor blades as it flew through the air, making a perfect landing on Matt's head. "Oh, Sopwith," he cried in mock annoyance. "Her name is not Sopwith," Tilly exclaimed as she rushed in, placing her face directly in front of her dad's. She gave him what another cuddly personage would call a hard stare. "Her name is Clara." They all laughed as the 4-year-old clambered into bed, placing herself between the two lovers. There they lay, the morning's excitement subsiding. Matt held Clara the camel in the air for all to see. "She is very elegant, Tilly." "She is not an elephant," Tilly replied. "She's a camel." "Daddy, Tilly, I had a strange dream last night. I dreamt that Clara had 650 teen children." "Gosh," Tilly replied Matt, "that's a lot of children. Lot of humps too," added Sophie. "Is it school today?" Tilly asked as her mind wandered to the next item on the agenda. "No, not today, Tilly," Matt replied. "You've done really well in your first week, though." Tilly nodded. "So I've got to spend the whole day with you two?" Tilly giggled and laughed as she was tickled by both of them. "Oi, cheeky," Matt and Sophie said together. "Daddy, Tilly, what are we doing today?" "Well, I expect we'll get dressed and have breakfast," Matt answered. "Oh, do we have to?" Sophie replied in a childlike manner. "Cocoa Pops, please." It was rarely any different, although she had begun to like Frosties. "Then Will's coming for the day," added Matt. "We're going to the seaside." "Yay, Will! Oh, great, I like Will," Tilly exclaimed, throwing Clara into the air. "Willy, Tilly, Tilly, Willy," she laughed. "Daddy?" "Yes, Tilly." "At school, some of the boys keep talking about their willies." Sophie and Matt smiled, restraining the desire to laugh at the expression of innocence. "Boys are rather like that," her dad replied diplomatically, and avoiding explanation, it has to be said. "Okay," said the accepting daughter. "Breakfast." Will Taylor vaulted over the driver's door of his blue open-top Morgan +4 and sprinted across the tarmac. His display of athletic prowess was not, on this occasion at least, for the purpose of attracting the oohs and the ahs of the watching crowd. No, not this time. This time it was for something far more important. The 32-year-old could still run almost as fast as he could when he was half his age, but the need for doing so was much more rare nowadays. It was as if Muybridge's photos of a galloping horse had been reimagined. For as Will's feet covered the ground, there were moments when they did not touch it. Those around him moved swiftly out of the way as the 6'3" bulk of a man sped past. A few shouted at him in disgust as he continued on his urgent mission. Reaching the adjacent building, the automatic doors opened automatically. He slowed down to a fast walk so as not to take anyone out, and he had to keep his footing on the hard vinyl flooring. After a couple of dodges to the right and then to the left to avoid first an elderly lady, then a children's football team, Will spied the welcome figure of a man. That of a woman was nearby. His heart lifted on seeing them. Will Taylor had made it just in time. He was bursting. The relief was tangible. He looked at his smartphone. "Everything okay, mate?" M. Adeptly using his remaining available hand, he replied, "Sorry, old chap. Bad traffic. Just stopped at services for a pee. With you in an hour, W." Having perfected the nationally recommended 20-second hand wash, and after buying a mocha from Starbucks, he continued his journey. The Honourable William Taylor, second son of the late Duke of Tainton, was enjoying life more than at any time in the previous 10 years. He was glad to be the spare, not the heir. Partially disinherited by his father, who considered his second-born to have been a failure in every aspect of life, it was only due to the more understanding nature of the newly ennobled elder brother that Will had come into the possession of the beloved Morgan, one of their father's precious collection. Told to do greats by his parents, Will was out of depth at Oxford. Poor results in assignments and exams led to lecturers calling him the university's contribution to energy conservation. He resorted to late-night partying to soften and, as he later acknowledged, deny the pain of loneliness and depression. It was in rowing that he enjoyed the more fulfilling aspects of life, and it was rowing which so nearly provided death. Today, though, he was on his way to see his long-standing friend from those times. Although friend is too insignificant a word, lifesaver is more important, more accurate rather. Will's disappointment at not being selected for the boat race crew in those Oxford days had long since faded. Even the rope with which he almost took his own life had lost some of its grip on his memories. It had been Matt West's timely intervention that saved him from the noose hanging from the beams of the boathouse, something neither of them would forget. The twice best man, Will, and his best mate, Matt, were 21st century David and Jonathan. They had a bond stronger than any knot. It's Christmas fair time, isn't it? Christmas markets going on. So I'm going to take you to St Mark's Church Fete, but this one is actually in the summer. And here we find Liz James, together with her parish nemesis, George Armstrong. Every parish has a George Armstrong. Yes. At least one. George Armstrong was giving Liz James a hard time. "Look, Reverend, I've given up a ticket to watch the cricket to come and set all this up," he said as she arrived at St Mark's Church Hall 10 minutes late. "Can't be doing with all this faffing about. It's just wasting time. Fate's due to open in 2 hours. Every year the tombola's there, the bric-a-brac's here, the bookstore's over there." Liz switched off as the litany of tradition was recited. St Mark's Church Summer Fete had been a fixture on the second Saturday of July for years. The annual event was George's baby, and it was now an awkward and difficult teenager. No one else had come to set up again. People just can't be bothered these days, George moaned. All stuck in front of their telly's computer or spending hours on Twitface or whatever they call it. So it's left to me to lug these trestles about all by myself. And you're just stood there asking if so-and-so could have all their stall there and thingamy-bob can be in that place. Liz's halo was slipping. George, she said. George. I haven't got time to talk about it, just help me with this, would you? At last he's letting me help, Liz muttered under her breath. Of course, George. Where would you like it? That's better, Reverend. That's the right attitude, and we'll get it done in no time at all. As they carried the tables, he continued his tirade. I do know why people don't like me. I'm not stupid. No one likes people who are angry all the time. But what I'd like to know is, what are you going to do when I'm no longer here? Who's going to do all this? Not thinking of leaving us, George? Liz asked, trying to hide the faint trace of hope in her voice. Nay, lass, but who knows what's going to happen, he replied as he opened a door. Liz glimpsed through the resultant crack. Something happened, George. Aye, but another time for that. We need to get on. The door was shut again. And just as he predicted, in no time at all, with half an hour to go, 12 trestle tables were set out ready to welcome the usual stall holders, in their usual places, with their usual assorted wares. Mrs. Conway's flower and houseplant stall was sure to win best display again. Arthur Sprocket's bric-a-brac saw a large brown chip teapot make its 13th annual appearance. The bookstall was crammed. While some had been before, there were a few new volumes this year. This one was published in 1923, Mr. and Mrs. Bryant said in unison. First edition. And we've got Geoffrey Archer, Jackie Collins, and Brian Cox, she said delightedly. There's even, they giggled and looked around to check no one was eavesdropping, there's even a Richard Osman. Oh. The church clock chimed twice as the Reverend Liz James declared the St Mark's Church summer fete well and truly open, and at past the first customers arrived. By 5, everyone was gone and everything was tidy. It hadn't exactly bustled, but there was enough to make it worthwhile. A few more pounds in the coffers, the church treasurer observed. Not bad, that, George said as he and Liz stacked away the tables. Quite a success then, Liz thought to herself. Yes, George, we got there in the end. Shame you weren't here at the beginning, all the same, George replied. Thanks for all you've done, George, she said, taking a deep breath. See you tomorrow. Maybe, lass, maybe. Liz watched him put on his gabardine coat, the belt hanging loose. An envelope fell out of a pocket. George grunted as he bent down to retrieve it. Off he wandered, stick in hand, a forlorn figure. Poor George, thought Liz. At least she had Tony to go back to. So, you'll need to read the book to see who Tony is, and what happened next, and what was in the envelope. It's lovely as we come to an end. It's lovely when other people pass comments on the books and write reviews too. There's been a couple of reviews already for this new one. One wrote, "This is a thoughtful and well-crafted sequel, has much for the reader to identify with. Highly relatable characters and life challenges. The closely entwined nature of village life is well drawn. Well-paced, spare, tight writing guides us carefully through the plot's twists and turns." And another person wrote, "This book is written as fiction. I think there's one incident is true or based on true events," which it is. "I found it a gentle fireside read. The ideal book for someone who wants to receive a little hope and a warm heart, but doesn't want to read a 500-page book to search for it." Oh, that was a lovely comment. And that same reviewer, in reviewing Looking to Move On, paid me a wonderful compliment, which I've quoted endlessly. "Richard's writing reminds me of John Steinbeck. Concise, brief, meaningful." A bit like me, really, I suppose. So I hope that has whetted your appetite and hopefully loosened your purse strings. As Reverend Richard Coles put it recently, books are a present that are very easy to wrap. The books can be ordered in the UK at least through Waterstones or via my own website, which has got an online shop to it, which is richardfrostauthor.com. That's at the bottom of the email I sent you. Or you can email me or message me about it. It's also available as an ebook on Amazon. This new book is dedicated to people who feel that they are different, people who feel they don't quite fit in. But I'd suggest that that is probably most of us. And it is that difference which makes each one of us, each one of you, special. So I hope that you might find it helpful as in relation to your own lives, but as a good read as well, something to relax with. So, I mean, thank you for coming from all over the country and Mel in America. I mean, I'm happy to take any questions or
thank you, Richard. That was amazing. You know, just a lovely space in an evening to be able to listen to that. Lovely, thank you.
Thank you, Judy. It was nice. Somebody came up to me after we'd had the in-person launch on Saturday and said they just liked somebody reading them a story. And I think we all do that, don't we? It's like that.
Yes.
And Richard, yes, thank you. I'm so glad that it's available as an ebook.
Yes.
And yes, I agree with your reviewer that suggests you have a lot in common with John Steinbeck. And I would like to extend an invitation to you and to Jane. I think perhaps you need to do some research in Steinbeck country. And I live not very far from Salinas and the Salinas Valley, where so much of his writing was formed. Right. So we'll stay in touch for that if you ever are longing for a very long plane ride.
That is very kind of you. Thank you, Mel. We'll keep in touch. We'll keep in touch. Thank you.
We surely will. And thank you for having me. And I'm going to head on to Amazon and get both of your books. So Richard, thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mel. We'll keep in touch. Yes.
Thank you, Richard. That was really good. I'd be willing. I'm intrigued now. I need to look at book 1 first and read that. So.
Yeah, it helps. There's sufficient in book 2 for it to be kind of take you back to what's gone on. But naturally, I'd love you to buy both of them. Do get in touch directly, Jackie, if you want.
I will. Thank you.
That's fine.
Richard, I'm very inspired by what you've achieved. It's special, and I will certainly look them up, both starting with the first one.
Thank you, Stephanie. Oh, it's really good to. I know we've had bits of contact over Facebook and occasional things, so it's lovely of you to join us and had contact with Louise, of course, a year or two ago, which is great. But lovely to see you.
Yes,
again.
you too. Right. Thank you for inviting me.
That's right. Pleasure. Pleasure.
So I too am very looking forward to reading both of the books, and it was really lovely to hear you read them. And I think there should be an audiobook in due course.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So well.
Thank you. Yeah. Oh, thanks.
I
thanks
second
so
that.
much. You right? Okay. Thank you.
I third that.
It's a shame to hear that, but I'm sure pass that on. Somebody who thirded it then? You, Karen. So Yes. No, I did have. I think somebody did put a comment on Facebook about whether it was audio. Well, thank you again. Thanks ever so much for coming along, all of you.